explaining how the media system, by the way, you can all hear me, right? NS, can you confirm?
Yes, we can
All
hear
good.
you. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so the media system in the world is very different to how a lot of people know. I figured this out when I started working in journalism. The top 3 news agencies in the world are AP, AFP, and Reuters. AP is Associated Press. It is American. AFP is Agence France Presse, something like that. It's French, and Reuters is English. So, 3 historic colonial powers. They're the most powerful news agencies in the world. And every single credible, reputable news organization that you can think of has a subscription to these agencies. So they pay them a lot of money just to be able to get the news that comes out of these agencies. So these agencies have control over a lot of the news that is being shared in the world. And what I like to call lazy journalism. So journalists, instead of going out there and finding their own stories, they're very dependent on these agencies. Especially when you start a new media organization, you're very dependent on agencies because they give you the news stories, they give you the visuals, the videos, everything. It's not economical for you to have journalists and producers and cameramen and photographers all in every single city in every single country, but these agencies do. That's why you pay them a lot of money. You get all of the rights to just copy and paste their articles, and also to be able to use their photos and videos. So this, what I call lazy journalism, is what's kind of changed the journalism industry. It's become a monopoly where these organizations control the way the media is portrayed. They control what media is shared, etc. Now, a lot of journalists would refer to these agencies as credible. Some might dispute it. Personally, I wouldn't say they're 100% credible, and that is my opinion. And the reason I say that is because these agencies are run by people, and people always have opinions and ideologies. So to be able to have a media organization push out articles to the whole world, it's something very powerful. It's a monopoly, and that's where media manipulation comes in, information distortion. They can control a lot of the information in the world. They can choose to focus on certain topics. For example, today there was the opening of ICYF. They could choose to focus on that. They could choose to criticize it, or they can choose to focus on something else. It could be the economy of a country. They could just, bully a country and make it seem like the economy is collapsing, or they're in the brink of war, or anything. It's up to them. I'm not saying that this is what they always do, but this does happen. So to understand that system, you understand really where the news industry is going in the world. And now, besides that, you also have within organizations. So, for example, CNN, BBC, NBC, whatever, a lot, large and small news organizations are subscribed to these agencies, and they just most times copy and paste, sometimes even with the titles and the same photos. They're just kind of just repeating the same news that comes out of them. But there's also organizations, news organizations, that produce their own news. So the editor of an organization who might have some kind of ideology or racism towards minorities or Muslims could easily say, why don't we go and shoot this story about these minorities doing something wrong, or these, how a group of Muslims caused COVID numbers to go up, or just, it could be anything that would kind of target that minority group or that religious group. So like an editor can, or a director or a manager within a news organization can also be the one specifically choosing to manipulate societies, the way society reads their news and what they read. that is like the mid-level. So you have the agencies up top, you have the mid-level kind of, managers and editors and such, demanding certain news to be produced. And then you have the lower level, which is the journalists independently. And they might have their own racial tendencies. They might have their own ideological, issues, or just, anything really. They're human beings. They have opinions. So when you ask them to do a story about anything, it will not be impartial, in my opinion, because that person has views. So they will make it as impartial as possible. When you're reading it, it will look impartial, but it really comes down to how you word things, what keywords you use, the sentence structure, what you put first. For example, let's just say somebody said something bad about a president. You could say, like, you would say the sentence and then you would say, says this person. For example, President blah, blah, blah was criticized for blah, 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 says blah, blah, blah. Whereas you can also say, blah, blah, blah says this president was criticized for, etc. But when the person is reading the sentence and then they come to says, they've already confirmed that that part is true. And then they find that, oh, it's just what someone said. But it kind of plays with their mind. That's just like a basic, something basic that journalists use. Another thing is also like another example of how people can use words, like a journalist can use words to kind of change the image, kind of paint a different image is, let's say you're saying something along the lines of, the president criticized the EU. That's simply put just a normal line, but you could change this fact by writing, you can write the president threw mud at the EU. So throwing mud, when you paint a picture, it's, it's something very dirty. Someone bad would throw mud. But what you're saying there, it's the same thing. You're saying they criticize them, but you're saying it in a way where the president is the bad person. So words are very, very strategic when it comes to journalism. So it is very important that, as Muslim youth, or, as youth in general, or just people in general, we need to be able to read a news article and see where certain things are strategically written to give us an image, to change our opinions, to alter what we would normally be reading in that article. So it's really important to be aware. Another example is, for example, let's just say there was an attack in Australia. Someone stabbed someone, someone shot someone, or started running people over with a car, which is something that actually did happen in Australia. People, like when this story is being reported, it's very easy for a journalist, a Western journalist, to say it is not yet confirmed whether there is any terrorist association, or it is not yet confirmed whether the attacker has any association with a terrorist organization. That sentence alone, there is no facts in it. That's just something the journalist made up. There is no terrorist affiliation anyway, but you just want to bring that up because the guy has a beard or is Muslim or whatever. And then it turns out to be just an Australian hobo who's just on drugs, but they want to paint that image sometimes. They want to, distort the information and paint an image when it's not there. Or like there was an incident similar to this where they said the man shouted Allahu Akbar and then he, started killing people. Apparently that's what a bystander said. And then it turns out, it wasn't the case. It was a lie. But obviously if one person says something like that, everyone just jumps onto that bandwagon and just, continues saying that. So these are just like small little things that people sometimes do intentionally and sometimes unintentionally. But, sometimes they do it so often that they don't even realize it's they're doing it, which is very problematic, especially from when it comes from more Western journalists who aren't familiar with other cultures and who kind of have slight racial tendencies towards anyone other than themselves. Then it becomes a problem, and they do start to show these strategic implications in their news articles or videos. Besides that, I also want to come down to the visuals. So visuals are very important. You could open any news article and just come across a photo of, let's just say, the president or prime minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. They could put a photo of him smiling with makeup, looking good in a suit. Everything's well. He looks professional. He must be. It just gives that image of he must be someone professional. He must be someone that's turned on, or he's someone who is a good person. Look, he's smiling. And then when it comes to another president who that media organization doesn't like, or that the ideology behind that media organization doesn't like, they would put someone who was kind of like they had a bad facial expression, and a photo was taken, and they would use that. The person might be looking angry, they might be looking with their eyebrows in. It could be anything, but those simple things that they do, it's really like, there was a Turkish minister who was recently fired in Australia. Apparently he had a lot of wrongdoings and stuff, but besides that, they used the worst pictures you can find of the guy. Like, if I didn't know the person in person, I would have said, who is this person, like, with the photos they used. That's just one example, but they always tend to use photos positively and negatively, depending on the situation, on what they want to kind of paint an image of. So it is very important when you're reading an article, don't get kind of judgmental from the photo, because they can be deceiving. This can also happen with videos as well. For example, let's just say it's a story on a country's economical situation. They could go to the poorest of the poorest village and find the poorest person there and kind of shoot around their house and speak to them. That person could be saying things like, we're very poor, we can't get along, the financial situation is bad, we can't find any jobs here. And then they will paint the image that that is the whole country. But it's not. That's not the whole country. So it's important to realize that sometimes what you see is true. Yes, there might be a poor person in a village somewhere in that country, but that does not paint the image of the whole country. I'm not saying there aren't poor countries. Yes, there are poor countries, and there are other wealthier countries. But we could also come to the topic of homelessness. Germany could do a story on homelessness in, for example, Turkey. Turkey doesn't have a homelessness problem. It's probably very, very small. You never see homeless people on the street. But Germany does have a homelessness problem. But I'm sure German journalists can come to Turkey, and if they search hard enough, they'll find a homeless man somewhere, and they'll shoot a story on how he is struggling as a homeless person in Turkey. And when you watch that, you'll be like, oh, wow, Turkey has a homelessness problem, but it doesn't. So that's another way that information can be distorted, or, what you think of a certain country or a certain person, a certain group of people, a certain religion, etc., can change based on these, simple techniques. So it's very important to be aware. Besides that, just going through my notes here, local media. So local media is kind of what you'd see just in your neighborhood, reporting on your council, this street will be closed on this date, or a story of how someone, is having a massive celebration, or just something local, like for that suburb or that town. Local media, unfortunately, is very important. It is very, very vital to have local media in every single city, state, suburb, whatever, in every country, because they report on stories that are important to us, and they also report to the world stories that normal journalists would not be reporting, especially with this whole concept of agencies, because agencies only report big stories and the smaller stories always disappearing. They're not there. They're always, due to these agencies, a lot of local media have collapsed. They've lost funds. No one's really reading it. No one's supporting it. But it's important that local media is there because there's a lot less manipulation. They're generally journalists who are within us. So they report stories that matter to us. And they will be reporting on councils and smaller scale politicians in the area who could be corrupt or not. So they will be reporting on issues like this, or issues of water cleanliness in that area, or how some parks are getting demolished to build houses, or stuff like that. These are just as important to us as well. So you won't get a lot of manipulation with local media. That's why it's important. So in terms of subscriptions, as I said, almost every single media organization that you follow, that you read from, is subscribed to these free agencies: AP, AFP, Reuters. So it is a monopoly, and it just when you think about it, I'll show you some videos on just some of the risks of having such a monopoly, because there are people behind these organizations and they have opinions and ideologies, and sometimes they might not be pure. Moving on. I also want to talk about verification of media. So besides this whole thing of manipulation, we also need to be able to verify media in order to know whether it's true or not. So we had an incident where we went to Greek border between Turkey and Greece, where a lot of refugees were trying to cross into Europe. And we were riding along the border when we came across a group of people who were stripped pretty much half naked, and they crossed into Greece. They were beaten, they were stripped. They took their money and their mobile phones and anything they had with them. They were stripped, they were beaten, and they were thrown back into the river and sent back to Turkey. And we came across these people, and while we were shooting there, we also came across a group of people who, we heard some screams across the river, and a new group was coming through. And we documented this. And what happened was, we had probably about an hour's worth of footage. I had a GoPro, and our friend Bilal Khalid, he's a great photographer, he had a camera on a crane, and we got some great footage. In fact, these images and photos were shared online. I'll actually show you guys on my screen what I'm talking about. So these were the visuals that we came across. So I won't get into the whole footage, as some of it's inappropriate. But this, when it was shared, it became a big thing. You know, a European country was torturing refugees and was sending them back to Turkey for a river. You can see in the footage the river was dried up, but it was a big problem, and it was a big thing, and it exploded across the world. A lot of news agencies shared it. The photos, some of the photos that Bilal took, he uploaded on Getty Images. and a lot of media organizations took it from there. And in order to, because Greece was very offended by us proving that they've been doing this for years. They've been doing this since 2012. Like, there are articles from Human Rights Watch and other organizations that state that they've been doing this. We came across a lot of trolls in social media saying that it was fake, it was staged. So we came across this person who, obviously, they're from another country, but when you translate, they wrote up a thread on how most likely this is not fake. So they went through all of the images, all of the visuals. So this is kind of how you can verify whether something is true or not. So looking through this, they obviously gave personal opinions that, is this Turkish propaganda? Who's Bilal Khaled? Just looking through what was shared, Amnesty documentation, where it was shared. And just as you keep translating, you look into the different stages that this person has used to kind of determine whether these visuals are fake or not, because the allegations by the Greek trolls were that it was staged. So he was going through the various images, like these were the images on Getty Images. That's me there holding a GoPro. Let's see what it says here. The cameraman is in one of the photos, is no mystery either. It's Abdul Tanveri, etc. He was there that day and made videos for TRT World. So there's actually me speaking to the camera. Like, it's people were sharing this photo on the left saying that, look, it was staged, look at the camera, etc. But I was there. I actually had a video published by TRT World with me talking to the camera, and the video itself is here. So this person also looked at the GPS location of the images, so the geotag location, etc., and kind of confirmed that it was where it was. And he's got the coordinates here, and that was roughly where we were on the Turkish side over here. And this river was kind of dried up. So this is a very, very good example of how you can verify images and visuals when you're not sure. You might actually come across fake stuff. You might, come across real stuff. So to confirm something, there are different stages which you can look through here. Another way of confirming certain things is to speak to people on the ground. There are always journalists on the ground. You can use Twitter and TweetDeck to do a geolocation search. Let's just say there was an explosion in Mogadishu, and you want to find out if the death toll is true or not. You can do a geolocation search and find people that are tweeting from there, and then speak to these people and say, did you see something, etc. How many people do you reckon have been killed? That will give you a rough thing. Or if you find the journalist, that will give you real figures. And then you will have the accurate, an accurate understanding of what happened there. That's just an example, but obviously this can be implemented in various situations. Moving on, I was also going to talk about fake news. Okay, coming to fake news. Fake news can be, it's not just an article that's been shared. It can be a lot of different things, but when you look at the whole Russia scandal with Trump, it was a lot of articles being shared, about the opposition or about Trump from various sources. People were paid to do this. Like, for example, you'd have CNBC News or NBC News or whatever. They would create websites that looked legit, and they'd name it something like CMNBC, CBNC, whatever, anything that sounds legit. And the sites would look legit, and then they'd write up articles, and they would share this on Facebook and on social media, and they would pay money to have certain people read these articles. So they would target certain areas, certain audiences, certain age groups and genders, and they would try to change the course of an election, which is the allegation that Trump wasn't going to win, because and fake news made him win. So fake news is very dangerous. That's one example, news articles that are fake. Another example could be in India and Pakistan, WhatsApp is a very big issue. People are sharing a lot of fake news on WhatsApp, and like aunties and uncles and elder people who don't really have the technology mindset and the background of verifying these things. And they say, if someone shared this, it's probably true. So they would share it to another 200 contacts that they have on their WhatsApp. And this, by doing so, a lot of fake news can be spread across, like other uncles and aunties, and it becomes a serious problem. So it's very important that we don't just share something that comes to us on Facebook, on WhatsApp, without verifying it. It's very easy to assume something is correct because, why would someone share a lie? But people do this. People do this for a number of reasons. It could be ideological. It could be to achieve a certain target on something. It could be political. It could be anything. So it is very important that we don't share something without actually confirming it. It's very important. And another issue is deepfake. But before I get into deepfake, I want to talk about what you can do when you see an article that has been written that you can just see they're manipulating the news in order to change the opinion of the audience, and what they're writing is not correct, or it is kind of just they choose and select parts to kind of paint an image that isn't correct. So when you see a news article like this, you can speak to your local council or politicians. You can write a letter to them saying that this journalist, this media organization is constantly bullying this minority group. We feel offended, etc. You can write an article. You can actually start a WhatsApp group, among a couple of friends or NGOs, and have like a weekly thing where you share news articles that are problematic, and you can write to them. You can write to the editor of the news organization. You can write to the journalist. You can tag them on Twitter. You can say, look, what you're doing here is wrong. And this, it might not seem like it works, but it will eventually work. And if you keep doing this, it will work. So it's very important that you, it's also important that you keep in contact with journalists. If you're the leader of an NGO, you should be in touch with journalists, with council members, with police, fire brigades, or anything. You should always be involved, so that when you do have a problem like this, you can always speak to them. You can contact them and be like, hey, you wrote this article. I don't think this is correct. I feel like you've put implications there which are offensive towards my minority religious group or whatever it is. And you can kind of embarrass them, or you can tell them that what they're doing is shameful. It might not always work, but it is obviously a step in the right direction. And now coming to deepfake, I will share my screen again. So I'm going to show you guys a video. I don't know how many of you have watched this movie, Taxi Driver. So here you see Al Pacino, but it's not actually Al Pacino. When you look at this video, it's Robert De Niro, and they've used technology to change what it is. The days can go on regularity. So it's actually Robert De Niro, but they've changed his face. You can look at other examples of deepfake online yourselves. There's a lot of Obama videos that you've probably already seen. So it makes it look as if Obama is speaking, but it's not him speaking. So this is not a massive problem at the moment, but it's going to become a serious problem in the future. And it is something that we should be aware of, because you never know when it's going to be used against Muslims or against other minority groups. You could be from a country where they make something about the president, and people could protest and topple over that president because it's a controversial video, but it could be fake. So it's not something that's dangerous now, but as technology increases, like you can find technology for this on the deep web, but sooner or later, it's going to be available in apps and stuff, and it's going to be very dangerous. Besides that, I'm just going to show you this article on media manipulation. This was an article written by Michael Pompeo, Secretary of State, and he wrote, "The Iranian government is squandering its citizens' resources, whether it's adventurism in Syria, its support for Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis, or its ambitions, etc." Javad Zarif, the foreign minister of Iran, kind of fixed it up and wrote it in another sense. So the US government is squandering its citizens' resources, whether it's adventuring in Asia, Africa, or Latin America, support for countless dictators or its ambitions, etc. So you can see how a style of writing can be used against a certain country if you change the little things. It's funny because I think this was it. This the Thai Inquirer actually wrote an article about the protests in the US, but they wrote it in a way where a Western media organization would write it about a minority country that's struggling with democracy or whatever they want to portray. So I'll leave it here if you can just read through it. Actually, I'll read it out loud. Unrest and protests continued for a 7th straight day in the former British colony of the United States as the government vowed to use its military to end the demonstrations, US media reported on Tuesday. The protests began in the small province of Minnesota, located in the agrarian Middle West, over the killing of an ethnic minority by state security forces. Protests led by the minority Black community have erupted throughout the country, with the minority group calling for equal rights and better treatment from the government. Protesters have set fire to government installations and looted buildings throughout the country as clashes with security forces continue. The security forces have tried to disperse the protesters with tear gas, rubber bullets, and batons, but to no avail. So that's kind of the style that, as I said, the Western media organizations would be writing about, like ethnic countries, minority countries. So it's very, I found this article very funny. I wanted to share it with you guys. And I also wanted to show you this example. This is just a story from today, from Reuters. Erdogan joins thousands to pray for first time at Istanbul's Hagia Sophia. I will copy this and I will paste it into Google. You can see many organizations have copied the same. It's from Reuters. This is kind of just showing you guys that when you see articles being shared on different organizations, it's because it's from the agencies. And a lot of the time they've just copied and pasted it. Sometimes they change the title to add a bit of difference. But you can kind of see here how it's been copied. Not so much here, but more over here, how they've copied. This was just one example. Sometimes you get stories where almost every single organization has just copied it directly because it was breaking news and they didn't have time to, change it up a bit or write something from scratch. And want to show you this.
Vestel.com.tr'den yaptığınız alışverişler 24 saatte evinizde.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our Treasure Valley communities, the El Paso, Las Cruces communities, Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is
So here you can see Sinclair News Group shared the same script to all of their journalists, and they had to read it online. That shows you how powerful a monopoly of media can be. This is just one example. And obviously, because these are all the same, it was all the same script, people kind of picked up on it and show how dangerous it is. But when it's other stories, they could just say, we want you to say it this way. Obviously, the script won't be the same, but the kind of message they're painting, the message they're sending through would be what they want it to be. And you won't pick up on it because they'll each be reporting it differently. So it's very, very important to understand what's really happening. Yes, media will tell you something, but just you've got to be awake. You've got to be looking at the other angle. It's not always, yes, I mean, it might be something critical about a Muslim country. That doesn't mean that it's not true. It could actually be true. It could be something that we should be concerned about and that we should know, but it could also be kind of changing the facts and fooling the community. So it's really important to be aware. So this was on the same story.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets
Extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Yeah. Nothing says we value independent media like dozens of reporters forced to repeat the same message over and over again.
That's probably the best message to that video. So that's what I've got on media manipulation, information distortion, and fake news. I hope this has been helpful. This is, I don't know if I've kind of jumped from here and there, but I hope you guys got the message on how media can be manipulated. And having a media watch group, as I said earlier, is very crucial. If you can put together something like this with a group of friends or NGOs, it will be powerful. You can write back to editors and journalists, and some media organizations actually calculate like every negative response they get as 1,000 people or whatever. So if you have 50 messages, it's 50,000 people being disappointed, etc. Like they have their own measuring systems. So it's something that you shouldn't look down upon, and you should write. It will also improve your English or whatever language you're writing in, and it will keep you in touch with these journalists as well. So you can also call them up, contact them, and tell them that you're disappointed by a story because it's inaccurate, etc. And one more thing, I just want to mention style guides. Each media organization has its own style guide. So with us at TRT World, when we're talking about Syria, the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, we don't say president, we say regime leader or something of the sort. So he's a regime leader. He's not a president because he's obviously not legitimate enough to be called a president. So each media organization has their own style guide. Ours, I believe, is fairly impartial, but other organizations could be very very harsh with terms like Islamist or Islamic terrorism or other things like that. So you can actually find the style guide of some organizations online, and you can say, like, when you're writing back to them, you can say, I believe that your style guide says this, but it is incorrect terminology because it puts Muslims all into one box, and it paints them all as terrorists, etc. Or you could you could obviously tell them that their style guide is faulty, or that they should make small changes to certain words in their style guides. It might not always work, but you never know who might read it. You never know what kind of discussion they'll have among themselves, because not everyone is the same. So never give up, and just keep at it. That's what I want to say. I hope I haven't gone over time.
No, we have still 15 minutes. If you wish, we can move on to the question and answer session. I think there are some participants wishing to ask some questions. Yes, starting with Mr. Karim Kabari from Egypt. Mr. Karim.
Yes.
Yes, you can address your question. Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you. So, not speaking about degradation, don't you think that sometimes photos are important to support news the way it is? I mean, you can't, for example, post a photo of someone who's accused of war crimes while they are smiling and giving out flowers. So will it be considered as manipulation in such case? Or, I mean...
So I didn't get that last line. Can you please repeat it?
So if someone is accused of war crime or something bad they did, and you cannot post a picture of them smiling and giving flowers and doing good things, because what they did is really bad, and the picture should be showing what they did. I mean, even if you don't have a picture of this as an evidence and he's been accused of that, you mean like not that fancy picture that can make him look better than the way he is.
Yes, that is a problem. Sometimes they do that, like with Libya, with warlord Khalifa Haftar. France would be sharing his photo as if he's like a savior or something, but he's actually a criminal. He's a warlord, and there were mass graves discovered in a lot of the areas which were taken over by him by the UN supported government. Or you could also look into Sisi in Egypt. Some people might choose to use him in a suit, while others might choose to have him in his military uniform, showing that he's actually, a person from the army who is a coup leader.
So in that case, using a picture that's showing your opinion, like you mentioned about the minister in Australia, if he's really done something bad, will it be manipulating the opinion, or it has to be this way?
I mean, you're already reporting that he's, he's corrupt, or that he's done something bad when you're reporting someone. So you don't necessarily have to find the worst image that you can find of them. You could just find one that's pretty bland, that's pretty normal. They're not smiling. They're not looking like they're going to take over the world and kill everyone. Just it's a bit of a balance. But obviously, some journalists, they might be in a rush. They might be trying to find a photo. They've only got one photo they can find. So in those situations, there's nothing you can do. You just have to share what you have. But obviously, sometimes people do use this to give a message, which is...
So the professional way is just to give a normal picture and depend on the news itself.
Yes, but a lot of the time, for example, Benjamin Netanyahu, you wouldn't put a photo of him smiling, because of history, because of the wars, because of the children that he's killed in these wars, etc. So you would be inclined to put something that kind of portrays him as what he's done. Yeah, so it really depends on how serious the incident is. If it's something as simple as someone just said something bad, that's not something too bad. You wouldn't want to paint a bad image about that person. But if they've done something evil, like mass graves in Libya, that's crazy. So you would want to show
the true fate of that person.
Yeah, because if France is sharing his good face, then you are obliged to share the other face to make it balanced. That's another thing. It really depends on the context of what everyone's sharing as well, to kind of keep that balance, I'd say. That is my opinion.
Thank you.
So as a moderator, I actually have a question out of curiosity. Recently there was a murder of a young lady in Turkey, Pınar Gültekin. Probably you're a journalist, you probably heard about her. So when I was looking for the news, I always seen the guy who committed the murder was giving in the news by his capital names, like by his initials, not the full name, not the picture or his face with the blurry. And we see it like a lot in the last same problem when it occurred, when the only time we see it is the victim with his full name, with the picture, like a beautiful picture of the victim. Is there any specific reason why the media outlets are doing this, or it's just like I don't know, it's like a reflex came out like a couple years ago and it just like started like this, or it's just like is there any politics behind it?
I wouldn't say it's politics, and I wouldn't say it's a rule. It's kind of like I was on Facebook and I came across a photo side by side. One was a photo of the victim, and the other was a photo of the guy with his hair combed and looking a bit decent. And I said, I don't think that's an appropriate way. Like personally, like in my mind, I said to myself, I don't think that's an appropriate way of sharing an image, because you've got one person who's the victim, and you've got one person who's, just I don't remember the technical details, but I think he killed her, put her in a barrel and set her on fire or something like that.
And he buried her or something like that.
Yeah, and he buried her. Like,
it was really actually a cruel criminal. Like he's basically.
It's very brutal. So I wouldn't put the two together. I'd be like, they don't deserve to be in the same image box. Maybe if I were to share the man, I would share it individually, and if I were to share the lady, I would share it individually, and I would put them as two separate posts if I were to share it on Twitter, etc. But if it were something like Jamal Khashoggi and MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, I think that I would put side by side, because it's been shared so much that you can kind of, I don't know, to me, it just feels like it's not as extreme. I'm not saying like Jamal, what happened to him wasn't extreme. That was very brutal as well. But because MBS is a recognized figure and his image is already out there and people have already seen him, you're not really sharing something that's shouldn't be shared, because it's already out there. But with this man, you're sharing a photo of him looking all good and fashioned up. So that photo shouldn't be out there, in my opinion.
But why the media is just putting his name by his initials? Like when they are giving out the news, they don't like cover the entire name. They're just giving the initials.
I think that's more like a local thing in Turkey, like national. With Turkish news, they do that. It could be to do with the legal aspects, like in terms of like the court documents and stuff like that. They generally refer to, I think, as initials. Yeah, it could be based on that. But in international news, generally they do mention the name, from what I understand.
And okay, thank you so much. We have
I don't think there's a rule or anything.
I think okay. Thank you so much. So there's one question in the chat box. I'm saying why some media outlets use the names to deficit the negative images. For example, this Western media use words like failed state to refer Somalia, Some say terrorist country, anarchist, and etc. Are these two correct to use for countries struggling to overcome decades of war? And most importantly, are media right to use these words? There's a question from Ahmed Abdi from Ethiopia.
Yeah, they are not correct in using those words. It is strategically put there. It is intentionally put there. And I believe right now you could refer to the United States as a failed state, but no one would do that because the repercussions would be a lot harsher than what comes from Somalia. So it's very easy for them to find a country where if they share something, no one's gonna attack them. No one's gonna say, hey, why'd you write this about this country? So they just do it, and it's not fair. It could be because they have racial tendencies. It could be because they honestly don't care. Or it could be because they've been in the media industry so much that they've become heartless and they just like painting pictures instantly of and labeling, and that does happen because media is a tough industry. You always see a lot of, raw images and everything. So you do become desensitized at times. But a lot of the time it's put there intentionally, especially like, for example, Somalia. If that's a country where politically they have political issues with, let's say, a French media organization, then it is likely for that French media organization to refer to Somalia as a failed state or, a terrorist state, etc. Sometimes it is political as well.
Thank you so much. We have one more question. In your opinion, how we can protect the audience watching TV from manipulating and fake news, as in the general they think that is the truth? Nurhan Dovidgar from, I think, Egypt as well.
I think it's just being aware, like these things that I've mentioned. If you guys get a chance, gather children, gather youth from your communities, put them together and see if you can point out some of these, manipulation techniques and teach them how, media and other organizations use these techniques to change the opinion. That's probably the best you could do in terms of your community. Besides that, it's very important to have a strong social presence on, Twitter and such. So like, let's just say you had 10,000 followers on Twitter from, various different groups of, educated people or normal people. And you see something on TV that's problematic, you can share it and say, look, this TV channel has shared this. They're saying this, but it's not correct. It should be like this. They're always doing this. The owner of this organization is this person. And in the past, he's had racist comments, etc. Like you can share a lot of these details. And sometimes you never know, like you could share it 20 times and the 20th time it could go viral. Everyone could share it. And that's when you've shared a message that's very powerful and you've kind of told everyone. So that social media presence is very important. I'd recommend all of you to be active on Twitter and other social media organizations.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abdullah. Is there any other question from the participant? If not, we come to a conclusion. Due to the time constraints, we have come to our conclusion in general. We need to close the session. So first of all, I would like to thank to Mr. Abdullah Tanrıverdi for his fruitful presentation, and actually one of the most important topics when it comes to media, the fake news, because as you mentioned in past 1 hour, it's one of the most manipulating issues that is going on at the moment, and especially towards us, towards the Ummah, actually towards Muslims. So we have been informed very well from Mr. Abdullah. So thank you so much, Mr. Abdullah, for your valuable contribution to the ICYF media training, online media training. And thank you for our participants to be here for the past 2 hours. You guys were here and joined our session. So that's all from me. Again, Juma Mubarak and best regards. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and goodbye.
Thanks.